Thank you for joining us. This is story time with twisted slivers from the paranormal, the unreal, the real, fictional, and maybe just a sprinkle of truth.
The Last Stop. After a grueling day at the office, Grady boarded his usual evening bus. It was Route 23, one he had taken daily for many years. The familiar hiss of the doors closing and the gentle hum of the engine were almost comforting. As he settled into a seat near the middle, he noticed something peculiar. The bus was emptier than usual. There were only a few passengers scattered about. This is great, he thought. I could spread out and relax. The city lights blurred past the windows as the bus navigated its routine path. Grady absent-mindedly scrolled through his phone. The monotony of the ride was lulling him into a serious, simple relaxation. He began to look around and stare aimlessly. At the next stop, an elderly woman boarded. She moved with a deliberate grace, her eyes scanning the bus before settling in the seat directly across from Daniel. She looked at him with a strange, knowing gaze in her eyes. "Long day?" she inquired. Her voice was soft, but it was piercing. Grady looked up, slightly startled. "Yeah, you could say that." She offered a knowing smile. "Sometimes the longest journeys are those we least expect." Before Grady could respond, the bus took an unexpected turn on an unfamiliar road. He glanced out the window, and confusion started knitting his brow. The urban landscape had given way to a desolate industrial area. The streetlights were casting eerie shadows on abandoned buildings. He didn't recognize this place. This isn't the usual route," Grady murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The few other passengers seemed unfazed, either staring blankly ahead or lost in their own worlds. Grady grew uneasy. He approached the driver, a stern-looking man whose eyes remained fixed on the road. "Excuse me, but I think you've taken the wrong turn," Grady said. The driver didn't respond. His expression didn't change. "Sir?" Grady pressed. His voice was tinged with just a slight bit of anxiety. This was really weird. "Please return to your seat. Your destination is most certainly in this direction," the driver said, in a weird voice, no emotions. Frustrated, Grady returned to his seat. There, the elderly woman awaited with a serene expression. She seemed to be relaxed. She was looking out her window as if she was enjoying the ride. This is when Grady noticed the other passengers. They weren't on their phones. They weren't looking at their briefcases. They didn't have magazines. Everyone was staring straight ahead. "Come sit," she said as she patted the seat. "Sometimes detours take us to where we truly need to be," she whispered, without even looking up at Grady. Grady's patience was wearing thin. "Do you know what's going on here?" She tilted her head, eyes gleaming with an unsettled wisdom. "All will be revealed at the very last stop. Your last stop." Grady didn't know what to think. He just sat back down. The bus continued on its journey through the labyrinth of deserted streets, eventually halting in front of an old, decrepit building with boarded-up windows and a sagging roof. The sign above the entrance was barely legible, but Grady could make out the words "mortuary." This did not set well. Why were they in front of a mortuary? The doors hissed open and the passengers began to disembark. Their movements were in unison, eerily synchronized, almost as if they were moving on unseen conveyor belts. Panic began to surge within Grady. Nothing about this was normal. Nothing about this felt right. "I am not getting off here," he declared. He gripped the seat as hard as he could. The elderly woman remained in her seat across from him and smiled. "Grady, it's time. It's your time." His breath caught in his throat. "How do you know my name? Where are we? I don't understand this. I will not leave." She leaned in closer, her eyes now reflecting a sorrowful depth. "Grady, this is where your journey ends." Grady sat back in the seat. Memories flooded his mind. He remembered earlier in the day he had a sharp pain in his chest. The sensation of falling, the distant sound of sirens, the excited voices around him. He looked down at his hands. They were now appearing to be almost translucent and fading. No, this just can't be," he cried, realization dawning upon him. The elderly woman stood. She extended a comforting hand. "Come now, it's time for you to rest." With a resigned nod that almost felt involuntary, Grady took her hand. Stepping off the bus into the cold embrace of the night, he was moving, but his feet weren't propelling him. He looked down, and the bottom half of his body was absolutely gone. It was transparent. But fear wasn't his. He moved straight ahead, along with the elderly woman, and the doors of the bus closed behind them. The bus disappeared into the darkness, leaving no trace of its existence. Grady felt all the tension leave his body. He somehow welcomed the warmth. He looked, felt, and even sounded like himself. He looked forward to his long rest with his new friends.